Is us. Well, hello everybody. We're doing Plato, the Symposium tonight. We've done it before. Well, we've talked about it before, and but that was a couple of years ago. Was it 2 years ago, Judith? Probably, at least.
Yep.
And yeah, why don't we just jump straight into it? I'm going to be honest and upfront and say I just skipped to Agathon and read from Agathon onwards. Sorry. But that's cool because I was just looking forward to rereading Diotima's kind of speech anyway. But who would like to start from the beginning?
Well, I was wondering, I mean, Jody, is this the first time you've read Symposium?
It is, and I can appreciate that the first lead in is trying to acquaint us with the situation of someone telling the story of the story of the story. It's a bit of a handed down tale, isn't it, from one to the other? Yeah.
So, I was particularly interested to get your perspective, Jody. And Sam, I'm not sure, is this the first time you've read the Symposium or not?
No, the first time.
Okay, great. Well, wouldn't it be great maybe if you first timers could kind of give us a bit of a sense of how you responded to this wonderful piece of literature. So, Sam, did you maybe want to go first, or?
Well, now that I've got the green frame, I suppose I'll jump in. But yeah, look, I completely enjoyed it. I had read a synopsis, so I sort of knew or expected what was coming. So I was in preparation of receiving that, and really did enjoy all the different speakers. And especially, I only just read Diotima's speech today. So I only got to that part today, and that was fabulous. And I really did love the, and I think I agree with the overriding idea that love is about the love of wisdom and achieving of virtue, as it always is. Yeah, but yes.
How about you, Sam? How did you respond to the dialogue as a whole?
I appreciated how each speaker kind of backtracked from the world that they see it back into love itself and the qualities and nature of love. They came from their own perspective. I think the first one's really built on each other. I think one that I responded to the most was on the androgynous. And then Socrates comes in and really, I think, clears everything up and interweaves everything much better, and focuses back on himself being mentored and being walked through that. The end, I'm not sure what to make of it. I hope to be illuminated.
Would it be safe to say that this is one of I think there's one other one that's quoted too. Is it Laches? Is it Laches is also quoted as, but just it's the one time I've really seen a picture of Alcibiades. How do you say it, Judith?
Alcibiades is probably the right pronunciation.
Yes, Alcibiades. Yeah, that was confronting. That was really laying it out. That was that was true drama. That was really gritty drama there. Oh, where he comes in. That's a whole
absolutely
thing with Agathon, with him and Agathon and Socrates, like this triangle.
This triangle. Yes, really exactly.
Triangle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's how and well, anyway, we'll kind of get to that, I guess. But yeah, I was really interested in just kind of an initial response from you guys having the great pleasure of reading it for the first time, and for Courtney and myself having the great pleasure of reading it again. Because to me, it is unique in Plato's corpus. And partly because you do get so many perspectives, and you get the feel of an actual party. There's people there's people coming in drunk from outside, and there's somebody who's, who's the neighbor. And as you pointed out, Jody, it's introduced through this very sort of unreliable series of narrators. It's somebody who wanted to know what happened, and they weren't even sure what the time frame was. And then the person they ask about it, well, they actually weren't there either. And so then we're being set up to be suspicious of the narration here. So that's one thing. But also, it shows us how Plato had mastered all the techniques of literary style. As you say, the drama. It's a drama, right? But it's also a narrative. We also get, and this is always blows me away, Aristophanes, right? Who had portrayed Socrates in a quite unflattering manner in his very successful play The Clouds, which we've also read. But Aristophanes gives this amazing Aristophanic parody of a Platonic myth, and yet it's Plato who's doing it. It's like there are so many levels here. So yes, to me, the lead up through what I thought. I mean, the ones that Courtney didn't even bother to read again this time. The speeches from Eryximachus and is it Phaedrus himself, or they all contribute. They all build towards Agathon's speech, I guess. And of course, it is Agathon's occasion, right? He's just had this great victory in the competition, and he's the man of the moment. He's the megastar. But of course, he gets completely overshadowed. First of all, by Socrates, finally by Alcibiades, and then of course by Socrates once again to bring everything full circle. So yeah, it's just so wonderful, and I'm just glad that glad to have read it again. And of course, as with all great literature, every time you read it, you see new things in it.
I also saw it as a comedy this time, which I kind of probably missed the first time. It was very funny at the end, and I realized if you think of it, especially towards the end as a comedy, it makes a lot more sense out of the love triangle. Otherwise, you're trying to work out why all this homoerotic kind of stuff going on. But if you see it as, it does come off a bit slapstick at the end, where they're kind of squabbling over their position on the couch and stuff. It was really funny.
Yeah, well, okay, let's dive in. So yeah, we've had this quite unreliable commencement. This scene setting. We're not sure about the time frame. We're not sure about who was actually there. It turns out the person who was there was this Apollodorus, and it was. But he says it was when we were still children. So again, these time frames are quite mythical, I think we could say. Then who told you about Socrates? Who told you about it? It was Socrates himself? Oh, for God's sake, of course not. Okay. It was the very same man who told Phoenix, a fellow called Aristodemus. He went to the party because I think he was obsessed with Socrates, one of the worst cases at that time. And it turns out there's this whole, cult, essentially, of Socrates going around. And so this Aristodemus is so obsessed with Socrates that he follows him around. He goes barefoot. But so in a sense, we're introduced in a way to Socrates as if we didn't know already about him, but it's also Socrates in a kind of a different way from we've seen him before now. We've seen him as this kind of weirdo in the Meno or in some of the other dialogues where he just accosts people and gets a varying reception. Here, it turns out that he's actually incredibly popular. But anyway, so then there was this great victory by Agathon at the competition, and he'd had a party the day before. That comes out as well, and there'd also been some drinking on that occasion. Socrates says he's going to Agathon's for dinner, and he's made a real effort this time to look good. Aristodemus goes on, and they go off together. But Socrates starts thinking about something, and he lags behind, and then we get this weird sort of, it's as if the opening to the symposium is kind of stalled, essentially, just like Socrates, who turns out to have got stuck thinking about something in the neighbour's front yard. And it's like, everyone's like, well, where's Socrates? Oh, where is he now? Well, I thought he was behind you. Oh, well, send the slave to get him. No, don't bother him. And people don't know how to approach him in that kind of meditative sort of state that he gets into. Leave him alone, says Aristodemus. Well, all right, if you really think so, Agathon says. So then there's this issue about who's going to be placed where in the banquet. The edition I was reading, which is an old mentor classic from, I would say, the 50s or 60s, actually gave a little diagram showing the arrangement of all the couches, which was actually helped to
Put it in
to
context.
situate it in my head. Yeah, it was in a circle, and of course this comes up again and again. You know, who's where and who's. It's like I said, a metaphor for their different statuses and so on.
That's interesting that you say it's a circle, because in this version I'm reading, I read the introduction, and they call that room the androgyne, and they say that the couches are set out in a square shape with the most important person closest to the door. There you go. It's different take.
Oh, look, we defer to Chris Gill over everyone, I guess. But anyway, yeah, I've kind of rabbited on about this opening. Let's see what everyone else has to say about it.
I'm happy with what you guys are saying because I can't remember, but I just remind me there's a pretty neat little breakdown of what a eulogy should look like before we get to the eulogies. But yeah, what do you guys think about the start so far? Are you gripped? Are you on the edge of your seats yet?
It really did draw me in. You know, that oh, what did he say? He said, she said, he said, they said. You know, like it was obviously going to be very interesting. You know, it was a way of building suspense, and it did. It really was effective.
It is peculiar when you think about it, isn't it? Nowadays we talk about gossip like, you know, do you know who's dating who and all this sort of stuff. But there it was like, what were they talking about at the drinking party? Oh, like they're talking about love and like its relation to the cosmos. And oh, really? And who said what? I just cannot imagine that kind of thing happening.
And the people asking about the story, almost a generation later, are in the same situation as the admirers at the party. They're loving and liking the people involved and connected in the party. And they're probably mixing the two as well. They're liking the examples that they have in Socrates, they're admiring them, and they're liking what that is revealing, what that is. They're all in the same kind of boat.
Yeah, I guess they have philosophical heroes a generation later, if that's how it worked. But that did remind me. I was going to ask something about. Oh yeah, like this thing too. This symposium also made me think a lot about. It's quite striking that young people today or us today have very little access to the kinds of pursuits that these guys are up to that and take fairly seriously. I mean, we have it here with our book club, but I often think, you know, most young people, it's not codified into our culture that we could get together and lie around and eat grapes and talk about love and philosophy and stuff like that. It doesn't really exist. And it would be a really nice thing to somehow introduce to young people. I mean, we struggle here. We get 5 out of whatever, but yeah, it did get me thinking about that. I wonder why it hasn't, you know, that hasn't really caught on as a popular pursuit.
Yeah, I think it's and it comes across as really comfortable, right? All these, well, particularly I guess people like Aristophanes, you know, they're confident in their own roles, and so they come across as confident, relaxed, and yeah, it presents an attractive picture. Maybe it's an idealized picture though of philosophical conversation at the time, you know. So I think it probably is. But what do you think, Sam?
Well, in that confidence, they're happy to reconvene the circle multiple times. You know, they were all at the party yesterday. They'll probably all know each other and would convene that circle a month ago, and 5 times in the last year on different occasions celebrating different people. I think that comfort to have a circle, have that be continuous, and then have obvious places. Like, no, it's obvious that Socrates and his friend were both invited. Agathon, deserved to be invited. They belong in that circle. That's probably what's missing as well amongst young people, that we're so individualized or on our own specific thing that you don't keep that circle long enough to also do this, to get along to this as well.
Yeah, you're right. And there's something very intimate about that, isn't there? That they kind of are living with each other rather than just having a singular night out. They're kind of living in and out of each other's lives in this kind of continuous manner. Yeah, and you definitely get that feeling from, well, just the way that they come in and out of each other's lives, and the reciprocity of the whole thing, the way that love is set up. And yeah, I think it makes me feel a bit, is sentimental the right word? It would be nice to have that sort of thing, wouldn't it?
Well, maybe that's what you pointed to, Sam, that these people, like a generation later or nearly a generation later, they're nostalgic for that. It's as if maybe it's, well, it is idealized, and I think you're right. Sentimental is the right word, or nostalgic, or longing in a sense. Longing in a way for that intimacy.
Yeah, can I bring up a bit of can I just read a few lines just to help to illustrate that? I don't know the page number, but it's where Agathon, Socrates is entered, and Agathon says, who was reclining alone at the end of the table, begged that he would take the place next to him, that I may touch you, he said, and have the benefit of that wise thought which came into your mind in the portico and is now in your possession. For I'm certain that you would not have come away until you had found what you sought. And this is lovely. Socrates says, how I wish, said Socrates, taking his place as he was desired, that wisdom could be infused by touch out of the fuller, the emptier man, as water runs through wool out of a fuller cup into an emptier one. If that were so, how greatly should I value the privilege of reclining at your side, for you would have filled me with stream of wisdom, plenteous and fair, whereas my own is a very mean and questionable sort, no better than a dream. But yours is bright and full of promise, and was manifested forth in all the splendor of youth the day before yesterday in the presence of more than 30,000 Hellenes. So is that always that irony, always that irony, isn't it? Amazing.
Hi, Plato, you made it. That's nice.
Yeah, still got that Greek name. I don't know how to shake it. How are you?
But yeah, you're right, Jody. And it was actually really interesting, this thought about, well, Agathon had his play, was it his poem? I'm trying to think, I suppose it's his poem, but performed in front of 30,000 witnesses. Now, they didn't have obviously amplification, electronic amplification, so they must have been really good at projecting their voices across a huge crowd. I mean, that's a massive, that's more than an arena crowd. So it makes you think about the acoustics that somehow they must have mastered.
I saw a doco recently on how they had built some of these stadiums that were perfect semicircles, and the steps would rise above, and they'd be perfectly semicircle, and all the stage upon which people spoke was polished and long, a long thin rectangle out towards the semicircle, so that their voices would bounce off the polished surface and be equally reflected off into this semicircular, like, because sound waves go out in a circle, right? So it was actually, designed in a way that people on this side and this side would hear just as well as the people in front.
That fundamentally makes the amphitheater a speaker.
Yeah.
In the same way that the hollow of a guitar is.
Amazing.
Probably people have better hearing then than they do these days. Less headphones and loud cars and whatnot.
Loud concerts.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're gonna hit the drink again a bit, but they've got to be a bit moderate, they realise. Because they've got a doctor with them, Eryximachus. How do you feel, Agathon? Are you strong enough for serious drinking? Absolutely not, replied Agathon. I've no strength left for anything. Because he would be a bit exhausted, right, after his great triumph. But then we get in passing this information that, well, Socrates, he never gets drunk. He never drinks. He can drink or not. He'll be satisfied with whatever they do. So what are they going to do? So they're going to extol the god. And which god is it? It's the god of love. They're all going to pay tribute to the god of love. They're going to start with Phaedrus, who's at the head of the table. And Socrates says, this is really interesting. He says, no one will vote against that, Eryximachus. How could I vote no when the only thing I say I understand is the art of love? So no one's going to speak against it. And Socrates says that's the only thing he really understands. So then we get Phaedrus' speech.
Before we get to
Which
Phaedrus',
refers, oh, sorry.
just quickly, I just want to point out, it's just because it's interesting that Christopher Gill in the introduction says that the speech or praise, the eulogy, is a standard ancient rhetorical form, and guidelines for this type of speech are given in a rhetorical treatise of around 300 BC, and the eulogies in the Symposium are clearly modeled on this pattern. The eulogy should include 1, the origin or genealogy of the subject or noble birth; 2, the good qualities other than virtues such as strength and beauty; 3, virtues such as wisdom, justice, courage, and practices that win reputation; 4, habits and way of life; 5, achievements of the subject by contrast with those of others. The speech is also assumed that the proper form of relationship between God and worshipper is that of reciprocity. The praise to love, eros, offered by the speakers is a form of worship or benefit that should earn God's reciprocal benefit to them. And he goes on to make the point that the speeches generally follow that rhetorical form quite consistently. There's a little bit of deviation in some of them, but basically that's what they're doing, which helped me actually, because, you know, they do that whole thing where they're like, love is this and love is that and love has this virtue and this quality. So that was good to know that this was a standard form of rhetoric at the time. Anyway.
Thank you.
into
That's
it.
great. Yeah, no, that's good.
So Phaedrus starts off and he makes these references to ancient literature, Hesiod, Parmenides. So that, and I suppose what you've said, Courtney, and from Gil's introduction there, shows us how essentially they're doing variations on a theme, right? It's not meant to be particularly original, but it's meant to put their own spin on this particular format. So that's, yeah, really, really helpful to know. So Phaedrus doesn't actually come up with anything particularly, I would say, inspiring. He gives examples from mythology, Alcestis, who was a devoted wife, Orpheus, Achilles. But he says, and this is at the section 465. No, is it? Sorry, there's page 465, section 180 in the PDF. He said, in truth, the gods honor virtue most highly when it belongs to love. They are more impressed and delighted, however, and are more generous with a loved one who cherishes his lover than with a lover who cherishes the boy he loves. It's a little bit confusing. A lover is more godlike than his boy, you see, since he is inspired by a god. So I think we're meant to think that Phaedrus' speech was a bit underwhelming because it says this was more or less what Phaedrus said according to Aristodemus. Remember, this is all just reported. Then follows several other speeches which he couldn't remember very well. So he skipped them and went directly to the speech of Pausanias. And Pausanias goes a little bit further, I think. He goes with something a little bit more elaborate. He talks about the goddesses again, love and Aphrodite. And he says that Aphrodite is not just a single god. There are two kinds of Aphrodite. There's heavenly Aphrodite and Pandemos, or common Aphrodite, Aphrodite of the people. So what does that mean? Well, it means that there's a sort of a higher grade and a lesser grade of love. And of course, the love of women is the lesser grade, just so we're clear.
Was he the
And then,
original? He was the original Andrew Tate.
I don't think, I don't think Andrew Tate's anything but heterosexual, but yeah. So obviously, yeah, women don't feature much in Symposium except for Diotima, which is critically important. And so, yeah, Pausanias gives a little bit more theory about the lover and the loved one, and he mentions legal issues and the fact there are different customs in different Greek states.
Apparently, Pausanias and what's his face? The other guy are lovers. Pausanias and Agathon are I think Agathon. Pausanias and one of the other guys, I thought it was Agathon, were in a relationship of some, no, maybe it was Aristophanes. Anyway, one of them. Which kind of I don't know. Maybe that's why there's such an emphasis on the male to male sexual relation aspect there. I don't know. I'll read ahead while you're describing it, and I'll tell you.
Well, yeah, so Pausanias kind of goes into what are the kind of the cultural norms around these kind of relationships. And that's quite interesting, I guess, from a kind of a sociological point of view. You know, what's considered the appropriate way to conduct yourself in these relationships. So it gets into quite a lot of detail around that. But as he concludes, in my opinion, however, the fact of the matter is this. Love, like everything else, is complex. If not wrong. Considered simply in itself, it is neither honourable nor a disgrace. Its character depends entirely on the behaviour it gives rise to. So that's actually a really profound thing to say about it. And I don't think anyone would disagree with that. And he says, well, from this, we can see the point of our customs. They're designed to separate the wheat from the chaff, the proper love from the vile. So, I mean, if we try and put in our terms, it's what's an appropriate and respectful relationship rather than an exploitative kind of relationship. We may be able to gloss it in those terms. And so he calls it a hasty improvisation. But he says, Phaedrus, I'm afraid this hasty improvisation will have to do as my contribution on the subject of love. So do anyone, before we get into Aristophanes, who's hilarious, did anyone have any comments on that speech?
Oh, just sorry. I just found a note in the introduction. It says lifelong exclusive male couples such as Pausanias and Agathon in the Symposium are exceptional. So there you go. There's some sort of connection there, apparently. But it's a bit of a dodgy connection that he's saying, because in particular, the boyfriend had to avoid over-ready compliance and to be careful about accepting money or favors. This could lead him open to the charge of being a prostitute and so lead to loss of citizen rights. So it was a bit complicated. But it kind of, I think it shapes the argument a bit, because Pausanias has that homoerotic kind of interest, whereas Agathon, and we get into this a little bit more, but he conflates love with the role of the loved as opposed to the lover, and that seems to be that he's taking that kind of bottom role in the relationship, if you like, the object of affection, the object of love. So yeah, I just thought it was an interesting connection, because it's really drawing on our own individual kind of understanding of how we stand in relation to desire, you know, as the object of love. The lover or the loved object, for example, seems to play into the perspective.
I appreciate in this speech that it's noted that everyone forgives the lover, you know, as they sort of scramble and tumble and make almost rambling pleas and sacrifices to their loved. That and everyone there, most societies are happy to accept that attempt and wait for its outcome. And I think later on, the test of like the quality of love and whether it be good, that it be generative, is better characterized later.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sam. Okay, so then we get to Aristophanes, and he's turns out he's got the hiccups. He can't actually say anything, which is kind of funny. So then the doctor in the house, Eryximachus, gives him some home remedies to hold his breath as long as possible, or something we still do today, or have a gargle. And then in the meantime, Eryximachus is going to put in his speech. And he's quite, I would say, a bit pedantic. He's the professional in the room. He says Pausanias didn't develop the argument sufficiently. So he points out it's actually love doesn't only occur in the human soul, it's a much wider phenomenon. And of course, this is, I would say, really fundamental, just as a bit of a sidebar, to all the Hellenistic philosophies. So we see it in Epicureanism, we see it in Lucretius's On the Nature of Things. He starts off his great poem by talking about Venus as the great motivating force throughout nature. And of course, the Stoics also considered that the love and sexual drive was fundamental in the world, in the entire natural kingdom. So this is a really important kind of general point around not just humans, but the entire cosmic order that Eryximachus is making here. Love is a deity of the greatest importance. He directs everything that occurs, not only in the human domain, but also in that of the gods. And so he makes a technical point around, consider for a moment the marked difference, the radical dissimilarity between healthy and diseased constitutions, and the fact that dissimilar subjects desire and love objects that are themselves dissimilar. So this, I guess, gets to kind of ancient medical theory around similar and dissimilar, and what's a healthy desire, what's not a healthy desire. Everything sound and healthy in the body must be encouraged and encouraged and gratified. That is precisely the object of medicine. Conversely, whereas whatever is unhealthy and unsound must be frustrated and rebuffed. That's what it is to be an expert in medicine. And so he makes a point about repletion and depletion. And this is something that came up, was it in the Protagoras? You remember the leaky jar? Remember the person with all the desires who is never fulfilled? This is a really key issue in Platonic virtue theory. But he's coming at it from the medical point of view about what's appropriate for being sated and replete, and what's not appropriate. The physician's task is to effect a reconciliation and establish mutual love between the most basic bodily elements. Medicine, therefore, is guided everywhere by the God of love. And so are physical education and farming as well. Further, a moment's reflection suffices to show that the case of poetry and music, too, is precisely the same. Indeed, this may have been just what Heraclitus had in mind, though his mode of expression certainly leaves much to be desired. Heraclitus is notoriously hard to understand. The one, he says, being at variance with itself is in agreement with itself, like the attunement of a bow or a lyre. So Eryximachus gives a kind of account of how he thinks, or what he thinks Heraclitus might have meant here, but without getting into the absolute nitty-gritty, perhaps we can take away something around harmony. You know, harmony and balance is what's appropriate for the medical profession to aim at.
Yeah, I really felt the strong connection with biology and ecology as a whole here, as you know, looking at the whole living biosphere of the earth as something that reflects all through it love, you know, the very life force, you know, of, because he talks about procreate, you know, reproduction, doesn't he? He talks about procreation and reproduction in all manner of things, creative and otherwise, and it's sort of it's almost like a one type of force moving through everything, or as a motivatory power, and then you know, so that he attaches it to nature in a way. You know, that's how I felt. Anyway, that was just a feeling I had about it when I read through.
Which means in Gills's eulogy form, rather than taking it as a genealogy of the gods and a genealogy of abstract projections of love, he takes it as a genealogy of examples through the body and examples through life and living things that want to love and are reconciled and harmonized with and have all of that elementally growing.
Yeah, I notice here in Gill's introduction too, though, he says that Eryximachus seems to come across as kind of a bit of a pompous intellectual doctor who's enforcing his intellectual pretensions about the body onto the eulogy for love. And according to Gill, he's saying there's a kind of stuffiness or a kind of pompousness that the doctor kind of as a result kind of is enforcing too much of his own self or his own beliefs or his own theory.
Well,
it's
sort of a scientific view, isn't it? Sort of like a scientific view of love in a way. So if you wish to look at it as, you know, yeah.
So Gill says, for example,
and I think,
sorry, I'll just quickly read it.
oh,
He
sorry,
says,
Courtney, I was just going to, just read it, yep.
in his concern to impose order on this topic, he fails to notice that different themes and standpoints are awkwardly combined. Plato may be using Eryximachus to satirize intellectual pretensions, as he sees it, of medical experts in his day. Within the context of the symposium itself, Plato may be suggesting that you cannot be successful in providing a cosmic view of love if you limit your treatment to the body and physical elements, as Eryximachus does. You need to include the dimensions introduced by Diotima, mental as well as physical love, as overall theory of human and animal desire, the form of beauty as an ultimate goal, if you were to place human love convincingly in a cosmic setting. So, I mean, yeah, that's an interesting take, at the very least.
See, I would have read it as that Eryximachus is kind of foreshadowing what Diotima's got to say, right? So I don't see him as saying anything out of turn at all, and in fact, I don't think, well, far be it for me to disagree with Gill, but I don't think Plato's giving anything except another perfectly legitimate viewing of the issues. And I think he puts his own, as Sam said, I think he puts his own take on the genealogy aspect of the eulogy. And I think I mean, remember how concerned Plato is around harmony, you know, literally around musical notes, and how the cosmos is a cosmic harmony, and those are the notes that Eryximachus is kind of hitting here. So I would say that I don't think there's anything negative here about the portrayal of Eryximachus's take.
Yeah, he mentions harmony here as important. He's just saying that Eryximachus doesn't really present it too convincingly, but he agrees. He says that he definitely is foreshadowing the kind of cosmic dimension of love as some sort of deeply motivational kind of force that the Stoics kind of identify with preconceptions or desire or whatever, but which, as we go along, gets more and more kind of removed from what we think love actually is. Because if you think about it, love is very much starts off quite a homoerotic kind of experience, and as these eulogies go on, especially starting here, you've got this much more. I guess Freud will pick this up later, won't he? Because it's a much more what's the word? Foundational human reaching out towards the principle of the good that transcends what we would commonly call love, you know. It's an erotic impulse or an erotic instinct that drives the rational organism, or every organism in fact, towards its ends.
So at this point, it might, I mean, I was wanting to know if you had any thoughts you wanted to share, Vincent, because I know it's later for you. So did you want to say anything about the dialogue?
Yeah, I'm not that well prepared. I did go ahead and print the thing, but I didn't get too far through. So I listened to 3 or so podcasts summarizing some parts of it, especially the last guy who talks about the bodies being joined together, fused together, and then. But yeah, anyway, just listening to you guys and thinking about that, it seems a stretch for me personally that we're talking about the rhythms of the universe and stuff. To me, love is relating to human connections, and what's totally remiss, like I get it how they're talking about spiritual love versus physical, more sort of lust-based stuff, but there's no mention at all about the love between a mother and her children, or a father and his. So to say that the first love relationship would be a Greek male with his teenage apprentice, or whatever you call it, that's totally foregoing the original love, which is between a child and his or her mother. So I don't see love as simply only the romantic love. I mean, I get how they're splitting into different types, and the idea that there's the spiritual versus the physical, for sure, but also the nature of the relationship, whether it's to your own children or your own parents, and even the love that exists in that room between them. They're all friends, right? So yeah, they're making divisions to try and get more clarity, but I think they're missing that key element there. That's one takeaway. Also, in terms of like using the doctor as an example, and that he might come off as a bit pompous or whatever else. The thing to remember is that it's easier, in a sense, it's easier if you're the first speaker there, because you're not going to be repeating what anyone else has said. So for each subsequent speaker, if they want to make a voice for themselves, they have to say something new. So even if they were in agreement with previous speakers, are they going to reiterate it? So yeah, you know, and then Plato, through his mouthpiece Socrates, well, he has the advantage then of being maybe the final speaker, in that he can take, you know, listen to everything that's there, absorb it, and then come up away with something that's maybe a bit more nuanced and balanced. See what I mean?
But Plato, I mean, Socrates does make that point, doesn't he? Because he says, oh no, I'm coming after Agathon, and Agathon just won the award for being a great poet. This is not fair. So yeah, he kind of picks up on that. And everyone is kind of like not convinced that Socrates won't be able to give a good speech anyway. But the next speech that Judith, I'm sure, is about to mention is about this being bound together with one another metaphor. You know, the two beings that are looking for one another, and the commentary I was looking at was saying that one reading of that is exactly what you're referring to, Vincent. The idea of our shared life, that human beings deeply seek out this shared life with one another, and that there's this desire or need for reciprocity in our interpersonal relationships. So I guess it depends how you read it too.
I just want to go back to Sam for a minute, because I think you had something to say on the issue just after Vincent.
I was, based on Vincent and what Courtney has just said, I think the doctor has made it too stuffy, and then the progression of the story is that they have a little tip that in the eulogy there was a lack of reciprocity, there was a lack of genuine communication, there was a lack of coming back to the circle, and they argue about that before they let themselves move on. Like there's a that missing element is you know, revived again.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Do you remember where that happens? Because
it's just before Eric Semikas did his speech. It was a little, you know, discussion with Aristophanes. But to your point, Vincent, just around parental love, and this is where the Stoics are so important, or one of the ways in which the Stoics are so important. For the Stoics, parental love was one of the absolute fundamental glues of the cosmos. So it was basically present in all their accounts of human life. They mentioned that parents come together, they have children, and their love for their children is what forms all the other subsequent relationships that makes us families, societies, and polities, I guess. So you're right to focus on it. It's absolutely absent from Plato. But his successors in the Stoa took that on and absolutely ran with it. So yeah, just putting that out there.
It does appear in Diotimus' speech, but it's you're right, it's not treated very well. It's compared similar to the love that all animals have for their offspring, and basically it's explained away as a desire for immortality, which I think Freud actually kind of uses as well. He talks about our unconscious desire, you know, the reasons why we have children unconsciously is a kind of what do you call it, avoidance of death, that we can kind of live, we can gain a kind of surrogate immortality through our children. So it's an old theme, obviously.
It brings to mind a really nice quote. I don't know the author, but it's to do with defining love and saying that love isn't two souls looking directly at each other. Rather, it's two souls looking in the same direction. And that has a lot to do with offspring, having those longer term plans and whatnot. So, I mean, you know, even if lust can produce life, offspring, it's not a long-term picture with that person. So I think that's one thing that can kind of feed into a definition of love as you have a bigger picture with that individual, which includes procreation and that drive for immortality through or passing life forward, whatever.
But that whole thing with the procreation, reproduction, creation, that was really carried through also. We'll get to it, I know. You know, the idea of that power and glory also as another way of achieving immortality. That was sort of the other way it was discussed and described as well. Yeah, but that, you know, that's what I loved about the breadth or the spread or the reach of the idea of love being so all-encompassing across that whole realm of creativity and that life force and that pushing forward and that seeking of immortality. And it was covered across the whole spectrum. You know, it was intriguing.
Yeah, I was going to say the same sort of thing, Jody. That's right. That Diotima really sums it up with the most cryptic phrase in the whole dialogue, which is to give birth in, what'd she say? To give birth in beauty. And then you got to try and work out what the hell that means. But yeah.
Well, we'll get to that. But first of all, we've got Aristophanes' speech, which is amazing. I love it so much. And he's finally ready to speak after he's got over his hiccups. So he definitely goes back to this kind of origin story, right? He talks about male and female in the beginning. And he says, my second point is that the shape of each human being was completely round, with back and sides in a circle. They had 4 hands each, and sort of illustrators over the centuries have had a lot of fun with this. They had 4 hands each, as many legs as hands, and 2 faces on opposite sides of their body. And they used to go along spinning like a gymnast. And they were an offspring of the sun, the female of the earth, and the one that combined both genders was an offspring of the moon, as the moon shares in both, according to mythology. It's kind of a bit of a parody of Greek mythology. So what was Zeus going to do? What are we going to do about this? What were they going to do? They couldn't wipe out the human race with thunderbolts and kill them all off as they had the giants. So that wouldn't be a good thing, would it? Obviously. Zeus had an idea. I have a plan. Humans will give up being wicked when they lose their strength. So I shall cut each of them in two. And he threatens them with another division, but he cuts them in two, and it's kind of, you never, once you visualize this, you never forget it. He uses like a piece of string or some kind of as we use a plastic cord sometimes to divide these double-sided persons, and he makes them half people. And there's a lot of, you know, sort of detail around how he smooths them out, and then what happens then? So that's like cutting people in half. Literally, it's cutting people in half. And so that's an amazing metaphor for how people feel about looking for a partner. You know, they want their fulfillment. They want their completion. We use these metaphors all the time when it comes to an intimate relationship. And of course, you know, Zeus had to get the positioning of the genitals correct, so make it all work. Love is born into every human being. It calls back the halves of our original nature together. It tries to make one of us one out of two and heal the wound of human nature. Each of us then is a matching half of a human whole, because each was sliced like a flatfish, 2 out of 1, and each of us is always seeking the half that matches him. That's why a man who is split from the double sort, which used to be called androgynous, runs after women. Many lecherous men have come from this class, and so do the lecherous women who run after men. Women who are split from a woman, however, pay no attention at all to men. They are oriented more towards women, and lesbians come from this class. People who are split from a male are male-oriented, and so on and so on. So that's really interesting from a point of view of kind of gay history. He's giving a kind of an origin account of why some people are same-sex attracted. So that, as well as being kind of funny, this is also quite a profound account of human sexuality.
Yeah, I think that's really striking, you know, like, because we grow up in this culture, well, before 1990 something, just thinking that there is straight people, and you know, you if you're a boy, you date a girl, and if you're a girl, you date a boy, and anybody else who wasn't kind of strictly either or must be very, very strange. Like, I grew up in that culture. We all did, I'm sure. And it's kind of strange nowadays to talk to young people and see how openly different they are. They're, oh yeah, I'm gay. All my friends are gay. Being gay is great. And it's like, it's wonderful, but so different from when I went to school. So you can just see how kind of we must have lost our way somewhere a little bit, and went into a bit of a backwater for a while. They were more progressive 2,500 years ago.
Well, I'm not sure about homosexuality per se, but in terms of transgender stuff, I think the problem might be that it's become such a pride thing that people who aren't actually necessarily, they're going through a stage of identity in their teen years, and then it's too easy to identify in that minority group when they may not in fact be such. Do you know what I'm saying? It's sort of pendulum's gone the other direction. Anyway, that's quite contentious, but I do want to say something about the physiology of this little sort of story. It's fascinating. But one thing that struck me, we're talking about a human form, like round, more limbs, faces, all that stuff. There's no mention of whether there's two brains or not, because I don't think it would work if there were two brains. If so, it would be really ineffectual to have a creature like which way who's calling the shots, you know? Like, I don't think Siamese twins are especially more productive because they've got two brains, only if they're working in concert. So I assume this creature would just have one brain in the middle. You could have one brain controlling two faces, like octopuses. They have one brain controlling 8 limbs. And then, so if that was the case, if it's the one brain, when it was cleaved in half, then what? Is the brain split into two as well, and they halve their intellect? I mean, it's just hypothetical questions, right? Because it's all just a myth. But yeah, I was curious about that.
Yeah. Well, as far as I know, and some others who may be more acquainted with as well, but until relatively late, there was no understanding that the brain was the seat of decision making and other activity like that. So notoriously, and I'm not a Galen expert or anything. I've read a tiny bit of Galen, not much, but Galen kind of got stuck into the Stoics because the Stoics considered that the seat of decision making was in the heart. Galen said, no, obviously it's in the brain. Now, but that was like 500 years later than this. So I think it was another 500 years before people kind of twigged to the fact that the brain was the seat of decision making. So that's what I understand.
I think to say that these are two people of one body is to say they're of one substance and of one heart or mind and one forward going in life, and that they're diminished by being separated. It's also fascinating that it's of the androgynous, because these kinds of stories of the first man and woman split and looking to complete are very common mythologically, as a kind of culture trying to backtrack into what makes people seek each other. And this one's quite good, and I think that makes sense as well, because human, in a biological sense, as a mythological retelling of a biological quality, because humans have sexual dimorphism, where chimpanzees and whatever very pan-like ancestor we came from don't. And that's, and humans, and it's said in this, it's really interesting how a mythos like this can get some elements very usefully correct, that the genitals are swapped back to be forward facing also means now that to procreate, humans have to face each other, which means you have to notice each other and notice each other's emotions, notice each other's blush and everything else. And I have a theory that biologically, that's probably what helped us abstract our projections of ourselves onto other people, and allowed us to say, oh, this is, what affects me affects everyone else. It can characterize, everyone in my family can characterize the state, and grow out of just habitually acting, in a society, in a troop society. So these are very old stories.
Yeah, I think in this, I agree. It's a good telling, Sam. And this introduction here actually mentions something quite similar. It says, Christopher Gill says, Nussbaum, for instance, finds here an expression of the idea, markedly absent in Socrates' speech, that love is a response to another person's unique individuality by contrast with her own qualities. So yeah, it's that looking at the other, the face of the other. And it's also, like you say, it's an account, isn't it, for like, why is it that one is attracted to another other, and there's a bit of disagreement amongst scholars if that's what's actually going on. Other people are saying more generally that it's an account of why we would be attracted to other people for sexual reasons. And then there's another account here that it's just more general than that, that it's an account about the fact that human beings live a shared life with one another, and they require this reciprocity to thrive and flourish. Yeah, so yes, I think you're right. It's quite interesting.
And I think that argument gets laid out here as well, because they keep swapping from the soulmates finding each other specifically to humanity wanting to complete that circle in general.
But probably too, would you agree that the most what's the word? The most literal reading of this myth would probably be the least helpful one, but people still do this. People still say, wow, I found my other self, she's my other half. People still say that. I found my other half, meaning presumably that, well, of course I have the opportunity to be happy now because I found my other half. But I don't think that's what's meant at all. I mean,
I think it is. I think it's all of the above, right? I think it shows how profoundly Plato, through Plato's Aristophanes, not actually Aristophanes, how profound this vision was. It kind of expresses something absolutely fundamental about how we tend to to treat the other or the person or the partner or the relationship. You know, it's so profound on so many levels, while also being a bit of a satire and something funny. You know, it's meant to make us laugh, I guess, about these ways in which we view the other person. It's meant to make us laugh, but also it says it's meant to make us think about how culturally and personally we view it. I think it's so amazingly brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just to clarify too, I think the treatment that Socrates gives the love and loved, the lover and the loved relationship is way more sophisticated and nuanced, of course. And that there is a reciprocity there, but it's completely different from this kind of look, if we just get together, we're going to be happy. It's way more complicated than that. And in fact, Socrates, it has to be a comedy at the end in a certain regard, because Socrates' behavior makes him a hunter in a certain kind of a way. He's almost a predator. He's the predator of virtue. He's seduces these men using this kind of paradigm of how to do courtship, not for any sexual reasons, but so that he can seduce them into philosophy. So quite different from what's going on in this split person model, that's for sure.
Well, that's a good reminder that we really need to move on. Here am I getting all worked up about Aristophanes' speech, but we really haven't got to the nitty-gritty yet. So we get to Socrates, but then Agathon has to do his speech first. And so there's a bit of business around, you know, between Socrates and Agathon, you know. At this point, Phaedrus interrupted. Agathon, my friend, if you answer Socrates, he'll no longer care whether we get anywhere with what we're doing here, so long as he has a partner for discussion, especially if he's handsome. Now, like you, I enjoy listening to Socrates in discussion, but it's my duty to see to the praising of love and to exact the speech from everyone in the group. So Agathon does his thing, and we get to see what an amazing poet and speaker Agathon is. That's why he's won the award. It's a beautiful speech. He talks about love, while all the gods are happy, love, if I may say so, without giving offense, is the happiest of them all, for he is the most beautiful and the best. So he kind of touches on all the things that have been said so far, Phaedrus's talk, what Hesiod and Parmenides had to say. And he says how beautiful love is. He's very delicate. He's youthful. He's exquisite. But it's not just around the beauty. Much remains still to be said. After this, we should speak of love's moral character. Love is neither the cause nor the victim of any injustice. And besides justice, he has the biggest share of moderation. So he's identifying love with these virtues. As for bravery, not even Ares can stand up to love. So Aphrodite defeats Ares. He mentions what Anaximachus had to say. So he's kind of bringing all these different views together.
But he's doing
and
something very narcissistic too. He's making, because he's the handsome, young, sexy dude who just won all the awards, and he's making himself resemble the love that he's talking about in the eulogy as well. And in fact, Socrates picks it up later and says, were you talking about the lover or the loved, you know?
Which is Socrates' complaint that he's conflating everything good, possibly good, with this figure of Eros, and attributing everything to him and thus to himself.
Yeah, because love should play the role of the lover, not the loved. Yeah, not the object. Because love, Socrates, sorry to jump ahead, but desires some object. And so it can't be the object that is love.
Yeah, well, we won't get to, we'll just get to that in a minute. But at the end of Agathon's very amazing speech, everyone burst into applause. You know, he gets another round of applause, even though he's won the big award. His amazing facility with his speech attracts everyone's applause. So becoming to himself and to the god did they think of the young man's speech. So obviously that puts Socrates in the frame. What's he going to talk about after such a speech delivered with such beauty and variety? And then Socrates goes on to show that he's actually very good at this. He makes an appeal to Homer. He appeals to the poets. So what's he going to do after that amazing speech?
Just quickly before you get ahead, there's a really interesting note here in the introduction about that part of the speech, the end of the speech. And, you know, obviously Socrates in his turn comments on the influence of the Gorgias, on his particular style, his rhetorical style. And we know what Plato thinks about Gorgias's rhetorical style. But it says here that the Greek actually concludes after a verse couplet with a prose poem in which rhetorical devices such as assonance and balance clauses are combined with metrical patterns. This way of characterizing the tragic view of love may reflect a more general tendency in Plato's dialogues to present tragedy as a fundamental, superficial genre designed to produce an emotional impression without real knowledge of the ethical content of the actions represented. So, you know, he's saying that if we read the Greek, apparently it's really pretty the way it's written and really technical, and it's designed to produce a kind of emotional response. And that's what Socrates is going to react to in some way, going, well, I'm just going to speak my mind, you know, what comes off the cuff. I mean, I don't know how to eulogize like you guys are doing, because you guys aren't doing truth. You're just doing some technical firework display. That's what you're doing.
So Socrates actually hones in on some of the things that Agathon kind of left a bit vague. He says, well, come then, since you're beautifully and magnificently expounded love's qualities, tell me about this. Is love such as to be a love of something or of nothing? So he gets straight into the Olympus, straight into the interrogation. And so you tell me, of course, if you want to give me a good answer, the love of mother or father would be of a son or a daughter. Certainly. Well, then, let's get into the nitty-gritty. And so he talks about relationships. Is a brother of something or not? Well, obviously, the term brother implies a relationship. So that's obviously Agathon has to agree to that. So does love desire that of which it is the love or not? What's it about? Who's desiring what here? So no one would be in need of something he already has. So a strong man wouldn't want to be strong. So it's about desiring. Do we desire something that we already have, or is it something that we don't have? And so this is a little passage which is quite, it's like so many other of Plato's dialogues with Socrates in them. There's a give and take. There's a bit of a dialogue going on, and Agathon is the one who faces the Socratic interrogation. And so what's the relationship here between love and beauty? Wouldn't love have to be a desire for beauty and never for ugliness? Well, Agathon agrees with that. We also agree that he loves just what he needs and does not have. Yes. So love needs beauty, but does not have it. And so Agathon's not quite sure, but he's just walked into this complete Socratic problem here. So if something needs beauty and hasn't got beauty, would you say that it is beautiful? Not at all. So it turns out Agathon didn't know what he was talking about. It turns out, Socrates, I didn't know what I was talking about in that speech. It didn't take very long, but that great, beautiful speech of Agathon's is just out the window. As for me, Socrates, I'm unable to contradict you. Let it be as you say. So then Socrates launches into his magnificent speech. But you know, unlike all the other people speaking today, he doesn't put it down to his own knowledge. He attributes it to somebody else. And the person he attributes any wisdom that he might have about this is to a woman. You know, the only woman who actually appears in this dialogue is Diotima, the priestess from Mantinea. A woman who was wise about many things besides this. She even put off the plague for 10 years by telling the Athenians what sacrifices to make. So this you know, it's kind of in passing, but that illustrates for us what so many aspects of Greco-Roman religions were around. It was around trying to establish the best thing for the state by appeasing the relevant deities. It was a transactional thing. And Diotima had the name that she held off the plague from the Athenians for 10 years. Now that's a big call, right? That's a great claim to fame.
Why do you think
She knew what sacrifice? Sorry.
Why do you think he for his foil here he uses a woman? Why do you think he chose this Diotima? Do you think maybe she was like a historical figure? I mean, is there a reason he picked a woman instead of some older man? I'm kind of curious.
Well, I think it's because, and we get to this, what she identifies is an image of female generation. I mean, it's you know, this is one of the more kind of confronting things around this dialogue, that for hundreds and hundreds of years, people didn't kind of really know what to make of it. But part of what people have struggled with for so long, and particularly with, well, in Britain, for example, sort of translations of the Symposium were so, they were very they were very squeamish around the homosexual aspects, but they were also very squeamish around the sort of the authoritative nature of Diotima's account of generation, because it's essentially a female account. That's one of the things that's so revolutionary about this dialogue.
And what all the lads have missed along the way, because
Yeah,
they're celebrating their own glories, which is a very masculine,
100%.
like self-hyping glory. It's the glory that all men feel sometimes, as with men's position of the orphan, you know, trying to make a stake for themselves, wanting that. But Socrates is the first one to take anything and, you know, bring it back to something generative and then generalize that.
Yeah, and I think we need to remember here two things. One is that Socrates was the son of a midwife. His mother was a woman who went out there and delivered babies. And the other thing is that in the Theaetetus, he identifies himself as a midwife. He is somebody who brings people's ideas into bear the same way that a midwife brings a baby into the world. So that's two other aspects that we really need to bear in mind here. So he introduces Diotima, and I've got a feeling she actually was a historical person, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Has anyone researched that at all?
No, but another question on the same topic. I wonder if from this account that Plato presumes that women can become virtuous in this sort of philosophical sense, or whether she's some other category of thing, like a prophetess or something. You know what I mean? Maybe there's some sort of mystical connotation that stands squarely in the realm of mysteries and isn't necessarily the same thing as what is done in philosophy, for example. I don't know. Not sure. Because there is a sense here about mysteries, and there's a transition from a normal way of doing things, and then there's a stepping into the mysteries. Even Alcibiades, for example, tells the slaves to leave the room if they're not initiated, for example. So that theme's there.
Yeah, because there's that sort of magical element. I don't know if you call it sympathetic magic. How do you explain it? There's different types of magic, you know. But she's you know, famous for holding off the plague for 10 years. That's really powerful stuff, and yeah, it puts her into, like you say, into that mystical, more the mysteries side of of it. It gives her a prestige, a separate prestige in a way.
Well, it makes her like an intermediary between the gods and humans, which of course is what she goes on to say that love is. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So Socrates he's in conversation with Diotima, and he doesn't know. He doesn't know anything. He basically says he doesn't know anything. What do you mean, Diotima? Is love ugly then and bad? And she says, watch your tongue. Do you really think that if a thing is not beautiful, it has to be ugly? So she sort of dispels the idea that there has to be a binary here. There's actually a spectrum or an intermediary. There's something between wisdom and ignorance. And so this is illuminating. So it's the same with love. He's neither, well, he's somehow in between. Everyone agrees he's a great God. You know, he's been eulogized as a God with all the speeches up to now, but is that really the case? So where does he stand? What is God? Oh, sorry, what is love? He's in between mortal and immortal. He's a great spirit, Socrates, she says. Everything spiritual you see is in between God and mortal. What is their function? They're messengers who shuttle back and forth between the two, conveying prayer and sacrifice from men to gods, while to men they bring commands from the gods and gifts in return for sacrifices.
You know,
So, sorry.
I was just going to say, I really like this sort of topic, and it made me think, you know, it seemed to me likely that this is where you get into love as the erotic drive, as Freud would call it, or, you know, some sort of kind of account of our deepest motivations that drive human character or drive us towards anything. And we come up with all these psychological kind of explanations, but here they're just calling it like love. It's a spirit. It's an intermediate spirit between man and the divine. And it makes sense in a sense, because it's like, how else are we supposed to operate in the world towards some unknown good except through these kind of impressions that strike us? We might call them genetic or biological kind of impulses to operate in certain ways, but here it's using a different kind of narrative. But I see it as that. I see it as these forces they're talking about touch on the universal order of things, but they're the kind of things that drive our everyday behavior as well towards the objects that we desire.
So we get and here we do get what you might call a genealogical account from Diotima. So this is kind of in the reported part of Socrates' speech, but he's reporting what Diotima said about genealogy of the god. And in a sense, it's kind of a bit of an ironic version of it, right? It's the two parents who are Poros and Poros and Penia. Now, Penia is need or want, and Poros is someone more endowed, let's say.
In this version, they call it resource and poverty, just for fun.
Yeah. Now, you know, there's probably different ways we can interpret that, but Poros and Penia produce between them love. And so she gives an account. As the son of Poros and Penia, his lot in life is set to be like theirs. Well, what's that, right? You know, what is that kind of life? But she explains. In the first place, he is always poor, and he's far from being delicate and beautiful, as ordinary people think he is. And that's a bit of a shot at Agathon, right? You know, Agathon's very amazing, but he has that pretty commonplace account. Instead, he is tough and shriveled and shoeless and homeless, always lying on the dirt without a bed, sleeping at people's doorsteps and in roadsides under the sky. Who does that remind us of?
Yeah, I know what you're going to say. Whereas the other love was Agathon, this love is Socrates.
Exactly. But on his father's side, he is a schemer after the beautiful. We know Socrates always chases after the beautiful young people. He's brave, impetuous, and intense, an awesome hunter, always weaving snares, resourceful in his pursuit of intelligence, a lover of wisdom through all his life, a genius with enchantments, potions, and clever pleadings. So this is kind of explaining the incredibly various nature of love. You know, love is as various as the people who experience it and as the relationships in which it's expressed.
And its incredible ability to get what it needs. That's really the striking thing. And we all have that within us, right? Like, I think the whole basis of Rogerian psychotherapy, for example, is if you take away the obstacles that are kind of getting the person stuck and causing pathology, if you create this somehow open space for them, they flourish, they actualize. And that's the kind of principle here, is that it's varied in the organism, but it's got whatever it needs to do, so long as it can get the obstacles out of the way, it will find its way. Nature will find its way towards its end.
I realized quickly as well that this genealogy makes sense of the beginning and the end. That there's no, because it's so unknown who Eros is or what Eros is truly like, because it's a obfuscated genealogy, foreshadowed like before really known or understood gods. And then the lover of Socrates later comes in drunkenly. This would say that only Socrates is really like that, or an example of that, because he's transformed into it. And then the appreciation that his lover has for Socrates in the battle later is an appreciation of this kind of character.
Yeah, I think one of the commentaries I read sort of suggests that too, that Alcibiades is not in the room at this time, and so when he comes in and tells his drunken story, he doesn't know this because he hasn't heard it, but he verifies a lot of what's going on in here. Yeah.
So then Diotima goes on with her account. In that case, Diotima, who are the people who love wisdom if they are neither wise nor ignorant? That's obvious, she said. A child could tell you. Those who love wisdom fall in between these two extremes, and love is one of them, because he is in love with what is beautiful, and wisdom is extremely beautiful. It follows that love must be a lover of wisdom, philosophos, and as such is in between being wise and being ignorant. And that's such a good expression for, you know, so many of us who don't really know much about anything, but we know a little bit more than some of the other people out there. You know, we're kind of between, we're betwixt and between. That's
which would be to know enough to want it.
Exactly, that's right.
It's also a wonderful account of the psychology of motivation, because to me it's saying something really deep. Maybe I'm thinking too, broadly about it, but I see it really as this wonderful account that we are. Oh, I had a mental blank. Sorry, ignore me. Just that idea that we're always directed towards the truth. And so even if the particulars for us come up to be, say, fame or money or a beautiful partner or something like that, actually the thing that we love, because it loves wisdom, is always there, kind of in the background, behind the image of the thing, so to speak. Our love is true, our intention is true. It's just a matter of honing that through a process that Socrates will later describe, which leads to wisdom, But yeah, I just see it as it's just a wonderful expression about how we're all underpinned by this desire to understand things as they actually are, sort of thing.
So then we get to the nature of what a lover of good things actually desires. What's going on here? And so Socrates kind of reaches that answer. He says, was Diotima asked. And so this is so interesting where it's Diotima is putting Socrates through the Elenchus. Socrates, for once, is having to answer the questions. What will he have when the good things he wants have become his own? This time it's easier to come up with the answer, I said. He'll have happiness. That's what makes happy people happy, isn't it? Possessing good things. There's no need to ask further. What's the point of wanting happiness? The answer you gave seems to be final. So what does that mean? Then Socrates, why don't we say that everyone is in love, she asked, since everyone always loves the same things. Instead, we say some people are in love and others not. Why is that? I wonder about that myself, I said. It's nothing to wonder about, she said. It's because we divide out a special kind of love and we refer to it by the word that means the whole, love. And for other kinds of love, we use other words. So we've got all the different kinds of love, or what we think of as love. You know, some people are after success. We say they love success, or they love sports, or whatever. You know, is that really love? And so she actually refers in passing to Aristophanes' amazing myth. Now there is a certain story, she said, according to which lovers are those people who seek their other halves. But according to my story, a lover does not seek the half or the whole unless, my friend, it turns out to be good as well. I say this because people are even willing to cut off their own arms and legs if they think they're diseased. I don't think an individual takes joy in what belongs to him personally, unless by belonging to me he means good, and by belonging to another he means bad. That's because what everyone loves is really nothing other than the good. Do you disagree? Zeus, not I said. So can we simply say that people love the good? They want the good to be theirs. They want to possess the good. So then we get to the issue of how lovers do that. And then we get to this amazing passage around what do we really mean about what lovers actually want? And as we said earlier, it's giving birth in beauty.
Yeah. So again, it's more of the same, isn't it? Would you agree? It's this motivational kind of account, right? That we all seek the good. We're all lovers of the good. If we see the good in gold, we can't resist the urge to pursue the gold because we are committed to what we love.
But then I think she's also demonstrating that the test of it being good is that love leads you to something generative.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But you can see how people make errors in their judgment. And you can see, again, this kind of vexation that comes from having bad motivations or faulty motivations or ignorant motivations, if you like, because you want to have this good, but you want to have it forever. And you want to be the kind of person who is the bearer of the good. And if you think about it more and more, it means that you have to be a good agent. The good agent is the kind of thing that has the good at all times, cannot be deprived of the good. As soon as there's the appearance that the good is missing, you're no longer good. And that causes disaster. You become distressed, you become passionate, and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's just so clever. And we've seen this in Euthydemus as well, obviously.
Yeah, I just think it's amazing that essentially Diotima is giving this ideal. So the ideal is generation, you know, it's childbirth, and she calls upon the goddess Moira or Eletheia is really beauty. You know, generation is beauty. And on a literal sense, that's giving birth to a child. That's what the goddess is called upon. But it's also this metaphorical production, this generation of beautiful things.
And this made me think a bit about, it's funny how twisted this gets when the Christians appear on the scene, because they take this organic kind of reproduction and turn it into a different kind of immortality. It's not reproduction anymore. It's getting, well, probably not in ancient Christianity, but definitely now with modern Christianity, it's almost a continuation of your own individuality. And that's definitely not the kind of immortality that's going on in Diotimus' picture.
Because
It's
there's a funny line where Socrates asks Diotimus, well, what does this have anything to do with that? The glory of men, basically. He's the first character to all the others have followed that basic thing to make themselves immortal. And he's the first character to turn back.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sam. Absolutely. And so Diotima says, you see, Socrates, what love wants is not beauty as you think it is, and yeah, reproduction and birth and beauty. Now, why reproduction? It's because reproduction goes on forever. It's what mortals have in place of immortality. A lover must desire immortality along with the good if what we agreed earlier was right, that love wants to possess the good forever. It follows from our argument that love must desire immortality. And so then we kind of take a step back, that she starts talking about, well, what is it that animals are wanting when they want to reproduce? So it's kind of a naturalistic argument. And then we come back to humans. So yeah, this idea around immortality. And so it's about also not just the body, but it's about opinions, pleasures, pains, fears, and so on. Knowledge, memory, and all the things that make us human, essentially.
that stuff about knowledge is interesting. It made me feel good about keeping studying as I get older. What is called studying exists because knowledge goes from us. Forgetting is the departure of knowledge, while study puts back new information in our memory to replace what is lost, and so maintains knowledge so that it seems to be the same. I felt like ringing my dad and going, "Told ya, you should be doing some study," because he's forgetting a lot of stuff these days. But anyway, that's me being a bad son.
But I think she specifically mentions this idea around that we've just mentioned about what humans think of when they think of glory, you know. You'd be amazed at their irrationality if you didn't have in mind what I spoke about, wanting to become famous and allow glory immortal forever. You know, that's another kind of sidebar at Agathon with his fame for the moment. And how they're ready to brave any danger for the sake of this, much more than they are for their children. You know, they're much more concerned about their own reputation than even for their children.
The interesting thing with all this too is trying to untangle what is meant here for virtue. So love of the good is a desire to reproduce ourselves in some ways. And somehow it makes use of our generative function to give birth of ourselves in some beautiful way, like through virtue towards wisdom, whatever. I think that's kind of interesting. Can we discuss that a little bit? Because it's complicated, I think.
Yeah, so, well, I think the next passage is kind of key because Diotima gives this account of how it's a analogy between physical reproduction, but also this process whereby a man wants to have a relationship with another man and also produce ideas and arguments about virtue. And so it gives it aligns the process of reproduction with what's going on with this virtuous desire to reproduce virtue and creation in that sense. The sort of children she talks about, the sort of children like Hergus, the great lawgiver left behind in Sparta. Well, she means the kind of the law and the constitution he left behind. It's a metaphor around all kinds of creative production, which is of course such a key, you know, matter for culture in general. It makes it an analogy of physical reproduction.
But it seems like we reproduce these things between ourselves and other people. It's sort of set up in this narrative. So it's not like something that a person does specifically on their own. They do it through their relationships with others. In particular, here we've got Socrates with younger men, for example. So they need to be open to him in a certain kind of a way in order to become, yeah, like she uses that metaphor, doesn't she? She says when the pregnant one gets close to birth, they give birth. So there's this idea that they have to be with an appropriate stimuli in
The
the
midwife.
And isn't
Yeah.
that
Socrates is the midwife, yeah.
and isn't that also called in ease to childbirth pain?
Yeah,
Which in some way is a type of husbandry or a type
Yeah.
of partnership that allows that collaborative partnership that allows that opening up to the generative. And
Yeah.
Diomedes is expanding that to be example biologically, and she's trying to teach Socrates that that's how you be a lover of wisdom everywhere and love life everywhere.
Yeah. And it's much,
You ease it.
I prefer obviously this kind of story than say the modern myth, which is obviously the Cartesian one, that you do it on your own somehow, that in the privacy of your own room you become enlightened. When this is definitely not like that at all. It's about an interaction with other people, and more likely, like you're saying about the Lycurgus and all that, eventually it shapes laws, and it shapes society, and it shapes appropriate ways for people to live harmoniously together in society, for example.
Yeah, it's fundamentally around relationships, and she goes on to kind of illustrate that. A lover who goes about this matter correctly must begin in his youth to devote himself to beautiful bodies. And that's kind of, I suppose, inevitable that we're initially attracted to bodies. But then it's about the beauty of people's souls. After this, he must think that the beauty of people's souls is more valuable than the beauty of their bodies. And that's something that, again, we in our society, we have to learn again and again. And so, and after perceiving around the customs and the traditions, he must move on to various kinds of knowledge. And then we get to knowledge. And then there's a great sea of beauty. And gazing upon this, he gives birth to many gloriously beautiful ideas and theories in unstinting love of wisdom, until, having grown and been strengthened there, he catches sight of such knowledge, and it is the knowledge of such beauty. And so what is this beautiful vision, and trying to grasp it, and then we get this idea of stairs, this idea of the scala amoris, the ladder of love, from beautiful bodies to beautiful souls to beautiful customs, from customs learning beautiful things, and in the end learning just about beauty. And therein life, Socrates, my friend, said the woman from Mantinea, there anywhere should a person live his life beholding that beauty, if you once see that, it won't occur to you to measure beauty by gold or clothing or beautiful boys in use, who, if you see them now, strike you out of your senses. But how would it be, she said, if someone got to see the beautiful itself, absolute, pure, unmixed, not polluted by human flesh or colours or any other great nonsense of mortality, but if he could see the divine beauty itself in its one form? And Socrates says, I was persuaded, and once persuaded, I try to persuade others too, that human nature can find no better workmate for acquiring this than love. That's why I say that every man must honour love, why I honour the rights of love myself, and practice them with special diligence, and why I commend them to others. But then at this elevated moment, what should happen? Who should turn up but Alcibiades?
But just quickly to that bit you just quickly glossed, I was convinced, I try to convince others too, to acquire this possession. You couldn't easily find a better partner for human nature than love. That's the basis for my claiming that every man should hold love in respect, and I myself respect the ways of love and practice them with exceptional care. That's I wonder, like, the Stoic uptake of that would be that the way in which you practice the ways of loves and with exceptional care starts to take on that kind of their views around attention and vigilance and stuff like that.
And also orchoiosis, right? It's extending that love out from yourself to your family, to the community, to, yeah, as far as you can. Absolutely. So then we have another kind of change of pace because there's a big fuss outside, there's people turning up, there's a big noise, and who should be here but Alcibiades with his mates. He's drunk. Alcibiades shouting in the courtyard, "Where's Agathon? Good evening, gentlemen. I'm plastered," he announced. "May I join your party, or should I crown Agathon with this wreath? Which is all I came to do anyway, and make myself scarce. I really couldn't make it yesterday," he continued, "but nothing could stop me tonight. See, I'm wearing the gala myself." And so he makes himself immediately the center of attention, as he always does. They all made a big fuss. Where was he going to sit? Well, Agathon called him to sit next to him. And then, of course, in all the uproar, he doesn't really see Socrates. Alcibiades, the slaves come and take Alcibiades' sandals off. But who's the third person here? He looks around and sees Socrates. And so this is a really interesting interaction, I think, that takes place. It's banter and kind of, but it's actually banter with an edge to it. There's such an intensity in their relationship, and it's not all kind of, sweetness and light by any means.
No, he kind of, I think it gets a bit comedic here, but from a modern perspective, it almost sounds like a bit of DV going on. Like, watch out, he's gonna bash me. He doesn't like me talking to other men.
And if you've been friends with a few guys in love, it has all the intensity of that attraction and admiration mixed with that masculine willing to bully each other, that level of threat, like hidden.
Absolutely, yeah. It's not far under the surface by any means. So yeah, Alcibiades gets into the drink again. He wants the largest cup. He gets Agathon's slaves to bring a big cup of wine. And so Eryximachus, of course, it's left to the scientist in the room to explain what's been going on. And so what's going to happen next? So is Alcibiades going to do his speech about love? Well, and then there's some more kind of quite edgy banter between Alcibiades and Socrates. Now, wait a minute, Socrates said. Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're right. There's a really interesting side note in this from Chris Gill as well. I just thought I'd share it because he's suggesting that, I'll just read out what it says. Alcibiades, a famous Athenian politician, was 36 in 416 BC, about the same age as Agathon. The timing of the symposium is significant. It comes just before a series of highly controversial events. Alcibiades' advocacy of the Sicilian expedition, which finally proved disastrous, the accusation that he had profaned the mysteries of Eleusis and mutilated the Hermes, the phallic statues of Hermes in Athens, his association with Sparta and Persia, Athens' enemies, before a brief period, 407, when he was again an Athenian general and leader. The stress on the idea that Socrates had tried but failed to get Alcibiades to give up politics until he had become, through philosophy, a better person, is thus critical to the defensive presentation of Socrates. The allusions in Alcibiades' speech to statues and to mysteries are sometimes taken to allude to these features of Alcibiades' later life. Also, Nussbaum made that connection. On the speech as a whole, yada, 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 see the introduction. Don't worry about the introduction. But I just thought it's quite interesting because when I read that footnote and then paid more attention to the text, yeah, there's this constant reference to statues and what's hidden inside the statues. And so maybe not. There you go. bit of fun for the kids.
Well, yeah, and there's this Alcibiades is this kind of mercurial character, super intelligent, but obviously unpredictable, hangs out with the wrong crowd, who knows what he's going to do next. And that lends an edge to this this relationship between them. And you know, the whole dialogue's been around love. Well, is this relationship what we are to understand by love? Because here we have two people who are kind of at odds. They're kind of butting heads with each other almost. So Socrates says, now wait a minute, what do you have in mind? Are you going to praise me only in order to mock me? Is it that? I'll only tell the truth, says Alcibiades. And Alcibiades was notorious for being someone who didn't tell the truth. You know, he was Athenian one minute, he was over with the Spartans the next, he was with the Persians the next minute. So he was notoriously a traitor. Do we trust Alcibiades when he tells the truth? Nothing can stop me now, he says. But here's what you can do. If I say anything is not true, you can just interrupt if you want and correct me. At worst, there'll be mistakes in my speech, not lies, he says. I'll try to praise Socrates. And so he gives this amazing speech. And he likens Socrates.
You know that bit where he likens him to the satires. You know that bit? There's a word he uses here, hubristes, one who commits assaults, because he says, you're insulting and abusive, aren't you? If you don't admit this, I'll provide witnesses. And Christopher Gill makes a very interesting kind of connection here. He says this word abusive, hubristes, is one who commits assault, including rape or similar insult. The satyrs depicted with huge erections pursuing nymphs were associated with rapes. Socrates accused of hubris, insult, by Alcibiades in this section, turns out to be guilty of the opposite fault, failing to take up the offer of sexual gratification. But yeah, it's interesting that that suggestion's being made there, if it really is. It's pretty hardcore. Because in a way, he's sort of suggesting he's a sex pest of sorts.
That's right. And then he goes on to explain, give more detail around the situation. But and so Alcibiades says, if I were to describe for you what an extraordinary effect his words have always had on me, I can feel at this moment, even as I'm speaking. So we're kind of getting in real time, basically. You might actually suspect that I'm drunk. Well, we know he is drunk. Still, I swear to you, the moment he starts to speak, I'm beside myself. My heart starts leaping in my chest. The tears come streaming down my face. Even the frenzied Corybantes seems sane compared to me. And let me tell you, I'm not alone. I've heard Pericles and many other great orators, and I've admired their speeches, but nothing like this has ever happened to me. So Socrates has this impact, this effect that nobody else has ever had this effect on Alcibiades. Socrates is the only man in the world who has made me feel shame. And Alcibiades, you know, and again we're led to reflect on what it is to be drunk, right? Because Alcibiades seems to have this great ability to introspect, even when he's supposedly impaired by alcohol. He makes me feel ashamed. I know perfectly well that I can't prove he's wrong when he tells me what I should do. Yet the moment I leave his side, I go back to my old ways. I cave into my desire to please the crowd.
Yeah,
and again, we've got this in real time, you know. This is what's happening to me in real time.
And this is interesting if we think back about the role of love as the guiding principle, right? So here, Socrates is playing the role of love for Alcibiades. And for us, thinking very generally, the role of love is this motivational force that's going to lead us towards happiness. And that's what Socrates is trying to do for Alcibiades, seduce him into becoming a better kind of person. But just as, you know, the Stoics, for example, talk about the ways in which we get we misled and we instead focus on these external things, Alcibiades knows that Socrates is right. He's truly the image of what he desires, but instead he kind of shoves his fingers in his ears and goes, no, 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 and runs away, and then feels ashamed for his behavior, just as anybody feels ashamed when they know what would be appropriate, but they act contrary to that awareness because they're seduced by some other supposed good, which is probably not good, but obviously they don't have that knowledge, right?
And I think the force of that, the potency of Socrates being able to do that for him, is why he compares him to a satyr. But he does it philosophically.
But it also means probably that Alcibiades misunderstands what Socrates is for him, because Socrates is trying to lead him towards a better life. Alcibiades just thinks he's trying to torment him. He's seduced me, and now he's not giving me what I want. He's trying to drive me crazy. I feel foolish and humiliated and all the rest of it. Apparently, that's a necessary step in the dialectic, but it's not working on Alcibiades.
But isn't this amazing though? Because it's just occurred to me, it's as if Alcibiades is on the couch, right? He's giving this first person account, in real time of how he feels. This is, Socrates's therapy of the soul, but it's working on Alcibiades, who's telling us in real time how he feels and how he reacts, and it's the amazing first person account of a patient essentially in Socrates's practice of Socrates' clinic, let's say. And I feel like this, and this.
But we can imagine Freud reading
feel.
this, right? Because he's got this idea of eros is just like this in his Freudian account. And he has a couch that people lie down on, like it's a lying couch. And he sits behind the couch and just tells them to talk. So I think he was reading this really closely. There you go.
Absolutely. So, so Alcibiades gives some background. To begin with, he's crazy about beautiful boys. He constantly follows around in perpetual daze. He says he's ignorant, he knows nothing. But isn't that just like Silenus, the satyr? So then, Alcibiades takes a step back and gives this this account of he says, and this is what, and again, it's kind of in real time, but he says, but I once caught him when he was open like Silenus' statues, and I had a glimpse of the figures he keeps hidden within. They were so godlike, so bright. Sorry, I get emotional. They were so bright and beautiful, so utterly amazing. And I no longer had a choice. I just had to do whatever he told me.
Yeah, it's really beautiful language. It's very touching. And I assume these godlike images that are inside him are him seeing the effect of his ascent towards whatever Diotima's ultimate vision of reality, and that's what virtue looks like in the soul of this other person. It really highlights the powerful role then of the mentor, the one who's traveled a little bit further along the path. And I guess it's critical for people like Alcibiades and other younger men who are torn really between the common opinion of what the good is and this obviously much more beautiful life. But obviously, they need people like Socrates for them to have a glimpse, to become a catalyst for the kind of transformation, if that's the word, towards who they could be. Yeah. So yeah, we need people like Socrates.
And that love of becoming someone that loves and midwives the beautiful and helps generate it, rather than just tries to possess the common version of beauty, the earthly version of beauty, just to take it.
Yeah, and too often you find these older men that apparently have wisdom pretending to play this role, but then they seduce the young person and either do something that they shouldn't, like sexual, or maybe they steal all their money or something like that. It's very rare that you find someone who has their eye on the prize, and the prize is not to possess the young person, but rather to help that young person give birth to something that's important, something beautiful.
And that's the tear that Alcibiades is having, okay? That he has almost a split opinion on Socrates, almost because the drive to the beautiful is so great and so hungry and would require so much of him. It would be easier to consider his mentor as a lecherous stalker. It'd be easier to settle for that.
Yeah, he must be highly ambivalent. We can imagine the Stoics thinking that he's oscillating between different views of the good. On the one hand, he wants to be a famous person and a powerful leader, but on the other hand, he's already seen what's in Socrates' soul. So what can he do about that difficult situation he finds himself in?
And then there's this famous passage where he explains that he essentially tried to seduce Socrates and nothing happened. But then he also gives the other accounts of Socrates in the army, which are also equally revealing.
And he uses the line here, besides my experience is that of someone bitten by a snake. Is that in your version? It must be the same. But Nietzsche says the same thing. He says that of when he's talking about repression, and obviously he links repression with systems of morality. So I think there's a strong link right here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so that comes after this the account from the army, and this description of Socrates' arguments, you know, always on about pack asses or blacksmiths or cobblers or tanners. But so I'm trying to find the passage about the snake.
Oh, he says,
because I think
I've been bitten by something more painful still, and in the place where a bite is most painful, the heart or mind or whatever you call it. I've been struck and bitten by the words of philosophy, which cling on more fiercely than a snake when they take hold of a young and talented mind and make someone do and say all sorts of things.
that's in Nussbaum, isn't it? She focuses on that one.
Yeah, she does. But that's from the kind of perspective of what's his face, Medea and her serpents.
Yeah.
But Nietzsche makes this point, I can't remember, it might be in Thus Spake Zarathustra, about being bitten by a snake, and that somehow it represents the kind of, we'll have to read Thus Spake Zarathustra now. But something to do with his general idea about the way these false moralities repress or oppress our genius, our true spirit. We become like Alcibiades here. He should just be able to embrace his will to power and become this tyrannical genius because he's better than everyone else. That would be the Nietzschean view. But unfortunately, he's been infected by Socrates' poison. That would be how Nietzsche would kind of set this up.
But it would be difficult from a Nietzschean point of view because Alcibiades knows he's not doing the right thing, right? So the Nietzschean Superman or Callicles or whatever, they kind of don't accept that they are doing the wrong thing. Whereas Alcibiades does. He knows he could be better. He just isn't.
But Nietzsche would say that's a symptom of his poisoning, that if he hadn't met Socrates, he could stay in his pristine state. If he'd had better teachers, perhaps, then he could go about without any shame or guilt, like this ressentiment that he's talking about. I feel shame because Socrates, he's got me under his spell like a satyr, you know. If I hadn't have met him, I wouldn't be so tormented. I'd be able to go about my business without, you know, having to second guess myself and question myself. I'm not on Nietzsche's side. I'm just saying I reckon that's what he would do. That's all. It is an interesting point, though. Do we invent these false systems of morality that prevent, great genius from doing what it needs to do in the world? Or is it necessary? Is it really something like Socrates presumes to be a way of reorienting people to what is actually more, which is better and more temperate and virtuous, and that requires a certain kind of temperance and disciplining of the aggressive nature of man, if you like, something like that.
I just think it's amazing how Plato's shifted moods so kind of variously through the whole dialogue. So at the start we had the introduction, we had the different speeches, then we had Aristophanes lightening the mood with, and then Diotima's speech, or Socrates' speech with Diotima in it, kind of puts everything on another level. And then Alcibiades comes and shifts us once again to the personal, to the love relationship that's between them, from the general back to the particular. And then where do we go from here? Well, where we go from here is that there's a bit of again banter and chit chat, and then a whole bunch of other party goers turn up outside, and then Alcibiades goes with them, obviously, because really he doesn't have a firm commitment to virtue or bettering himself.
You
And then
missed the
who's
fun
left?
bit, though. You missed the fun
Oh.
bit where he decides to seduce Socrates, and he's in the story. Did you mention that? Where he says, "All right, that's it. I made up my mind. I was going to bang Socrates."
Yeah,
And
we
then,
went. I mentioned that. Yeah,
oh,
that
did
he
you?
tries to seduce. So
I
yeah,
got
he tries to
distracted.
seduce Socrates, and nothing happens. Right? It's
Oh yeah, you did
yeah,
mention
it's
it.
just as if he was with a family member. It's nothing, and he feels humiliated by that, right? Because nobody can resist Alcibiades. He's
Yeah.
incredibly attractive. He feels that as a personal kind of affront.
I just love the imagery of it, though. You can just see him, and like he goes into it, doesn't he? He's like, "Oh, I got him all, I made sure he couldn't get out of my house. I locked the door, and he was stuck there until like well after midnight. He couldn't go home, so then he had to sleep on the couch, and we lay there together for ages. And then I said, are you all right? Are you awake, mate?" And he was like, "Yeah." And it's like, "Do you want me to come over there?" Like, I can totally picture this. And he's like, "I'll get my blanket and put it on you." And then he even he describes that. Like, he's like, "So I put my best blanket on him. And then I got him in a hug. And I was like, 'Do you want anything else?' And he was like, 'Nah, bro, I'm all right.'" He gets cold. And he's like, "What do you mean?" Like, and then and he even goes on, right? And he's like, "So I thought this guy's not getting it. So I'll just come out and tell him flat out what I want." And then he was still like, "Nah, it's all good." So, I'm all good. Thanks, mate. But yeah, nah. Yeah, it's crazy. I reckon it's an amazing story. So
And
relatable.
everyone has a laugh about it, because it says Alcibiades' frankness provoked a lot of laughter because everyone, it's funny, right?
It's hilarious.
Especially since it was obvious that he was still in love with Socrates. So, the tables are completely turned. Alcibiades, that everybody desires and wants to be around, he was the one who was totally made to feel undesirable. And yeah, it's obviously a sort of a learning if he was prepared to live by that or to accept it. But in a sense, it was just a thing, right? And then he goes off and continues on his way.
But it's a kind of comic thing, isn't it? Because it has to be, because otherwise it makes Socrates seem like a really dodgy character. Because basically we're seeing a Socrates that's seducing young men, getting them into bed, and then when the young man who's really like thinks he's hot stuff pulls off his clothes, Socrates goes, "What are you doing, mate?" It's obviously, you know, kind of a funny stand-in for the old story about that human motivation again, that we think we get what we want, and then we go, rightio, I've got it, I'm going to be happy now, and we find out that we're not happy because in a sense we've been rejected by the good because we've selected the wrong thing, that kind of idea. And then, you know, it has to be funny because the way it ends next is with Socrates having listened to this account, then doing exactly the same thing to Agathon in front of everybody, you know, going, oh yeah, bro, don't let him tell you who you can hook up with. We can hook up if you like. And Agathon's like, rightio, Socrates is going to praise me. I'm not going to get in between you guys and be the meat in this, and let Socrates be me be the meat in the sandwich. I'm going to get on the other side of Socrates, so he can kind of, you know, have the best position on the couch and have me all to himself, kind of thing. It has to be a piss take, right?
And then
But
the way it all ends, right? So there's like 2 or 3 people left, Agathon, Aristophanes, and Socrates, and they're still drinking. The night's still going. Alcibiades went off with another mob of people, but those 3 are still there. Aristodemus couldn't remember exactly what they were saying. He'd missed the first part of the discussion. He was half asleep anyway. You know, so our source is actually half asleep by this stage. But then there's a discussion around tragedy and comedy. And of course, that leads us to think, well, what is the Symposium? Is it a comedy? Is it a tragedy? Or is it both? And and then what happens? He was about to clinch his argument, though, to tell the truth. Sleepy as they were hardly able to follow his reasoning. In fact, Aristophanes fell asleep in the middle of the discussion, and very soon after, as day was breaking, Agathon also drifted off. But after getting them off to sleep, Socrates got up and left, and Aristodemus followed him, as always. He said that Socrates went directly to the Lyceum, washed up, spent the rest of the day just as he always did, and only then, as evening was falling, went home to rest. So, of course, he's always the last man standing.
At that point too, I reckon, you know, the key point he said was that Socrates was pressing them to agree that the same man should be capable of writing both comedy and tragedy. Well, yeah, we've read the Apology, right, which was a tragedy, and here we see elements of a very funny comedy, but a philosophical comedy as well, I think, and a much smarter one than what you get in Xenophon's The Clouds, right? I think, anyway. No, Judas going, I don't know about that. Maybe I'm thinking it's funnier than it actually is in real life. Who knows?
I think it is a comedy. I think it's a real it's a comedy with deep roots, I suppose.
Yeah. It's not a Seinfeld, that's for sure. It's a very deep comedy, and it's got a lot of what would you call it? He gets to show off. Plato really gets to show off his abilities here. He can play multiple characters. He can do interesting framings, you know, and also he can write like Gorgias, you know, and stuff like that. So it's very incredible. It's probably one of the greatest works in the history of thought. I don't know. I haven't read enough, but I'll give it a 9.7 out of 10. What are you guys giving it? 9.8. Quick, Jody's going to yell at me. 9.8. It was better than Voltaire, that's for sure. No,
So
no one else.
Jody and Sam are newcomers. What do you reckon?
Oh, look, I got stuck tonight with another translation other than the one I'd read today. So I was having trouble, and I didn't have any numbered passages, so I was having trouble finding my way because it was different script. But so I really want to read it again. It's once was not enough. I need to go through it again and study it again. There's so much in it. Even though it is a comedy, as you say, that, you know, there's layers and layers in it that need more. consideration. Yeah. But I've really enjoyed listening to you and Courtney talking about tonight, Judith. It's just been really, really spot on, both your reflections and Sam. And I think it will be worthwhile following up some other commentaries. Yeah.
I'll loan you my one next time I see you, because it's got the Gill in introduction, which I thought was helpful.
I'm going to look for that. I'll look for that one anyway, Courtney. I will look for that. Yeah, just because it's Gill. Yeah.
The whole narrative transforms from rhetoric into a comedy, and it takes the theory and the ideals of love, which are generated on like a projection of gods, embeds them physically first with the Doctor, and then creates a kind of emotional motivational layer to pull the biological human being, and then Socrates embeds it, all of that really well, encapsulates it as a human drama. First with his lover, Dharmatida, but that was a generalized, like you have said, that was a compression of all their conversations in Socrates' view, and then all of a sudden, Alcibiades is there playing that drama out live, and it's very comedic in the same way that it's tit for tat in between the speeches. Like, whatever is relational, whatever is love, whatever is funny and difficult and generative about that, becomes their relationship as it's happening.
Yeah, that's a good point. So Diotima's final situation where she leads Socrates leads him to, is a kind of cosmic perspective. And then I hear what you're saying, Sam, right? You're saying, and then he brings us back down to the relational, and you get to see it play out. So the deep connection between the cosmic and its cosmic motivations, and also seen through the personal lens of what it's like as a subjective being in Alcibiades' kind of drunken state, for example. So yeah,
because rather than living the abstraction, they're living the cosmic reality and love of beauty as lovers, as themselves, between each other, relationally.
Yeah,
great
good
point,
view.
Sam. Yeah,
Well put, Sam.
Well, wonderful, guys. We'll wrap it up. It's got late. But again, wonderful sharing that with you guys. And you know, like I said before at the beginning, it really makes me want more of those kind of, what's the word, opportunities in our culture to have these kind of conversations. Because in a way, what we're doing is what they did in the Symposium, which on the cosmic scale, Sam, is like what we're aiming for, right? It's part of, you know, if we had the cosmic perspective, we would see whatever it is we're doing as a kind of refinement, a kind of way of engaging in and going through a kind of dialectical self-discovery through this very act that we get to share with one another. I think be lovely if we could find ways to bleed that out into our friend groups and society, you know, social groups around us somehow. Be lovely if we could start bigger and more groups, but you know, maybe that's a pipe dream. Sorry, JD. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, I did mean to mention on the way through there that allusion to poetry and the allegory of poet, you know, that allegorical idea of poetry. I really enjoyed that as well, because it gave poetry a sort of a cosmic meaning as well. And I just thought that was beautiful. All those words, beauty, poetry, love, you know, like it's all there on the cosmic level and the personal level. Yeah, it was good. Yeah. And Aristophanes is quite it brings obvious comedy to it, you know, in that comedic element is obviously placed there deliberately. Yeah.
And in closing, Sam, Judith?
Yeah, just thanks for sharing this amazing work of literature with us once again.
Great.
Look forward to seeing you all again soon.
All good, Sam. All right. I'll catch you guys later. See you, mate.
Yeah.
See you, everyone. Bye bye.
Good night.